Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Demon Folklorist. Today we're going to talk about the psychic experiences of the J family, because we're all a little weird except for Dad. Sorry, Dad. Say hello. So this is my mom.
Hello.
It's my sister, who you guys know a little bit if you've been listening.
Hey, you thought you seen the last of me.
All right. I guess let's start with the question we got from Jonathan Phoenix. So he asked, can any of us detect or see spirits?
Yes, I can. I am a discerner of spirits.
I have never seen the dead, personally, any spirits, anything like that, but I have sensed them.
I have only seen something once. It was at Warwick Castle in England. So we had gone there. Actually, Mom, you should probably start this story, because this story starts when I was about 6, and we had gone because we were living in England at the time. So what happened to you at Warwick, Mom?
Well, we had planned a day for the girls, all of us as a family, to go visit Warwick. And when we had got there, I didn't know anything about that they advertised that they have a ghost. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. Okay. So we had gone up into the tower where they claim the ghost was. There's another room where they say that this ghost inhabits.
It's not in there.
So we had gone up there. I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. We had gone into the room and there was nothing there. There was just, and I thought, oh, how clever. So we had started the dialogue with, there's nothing in here. I can't sense anything. So as we had gone through the castle, we had got to the dowagers. And by that time, we were looking at the beautiful pictures of Queen Victoria on the wall smiling, which is the only picture I've ever seen of her smile, and walked into the Dowager Mother's room, and there was our spirit. It hit me like a wall of darkness. And I backed out of the room immediately and turned around to Dad and Victoria. And how old was Lexi? You must have been tiny. 3. Yeah. So you were probably being carried, but had turned around and said, and here is our spirit. Let's back away. That is our Warwick story.
Well, that's the first part.
That's the first part. Here's the other.
Okay, so I had gone back to Warwick. I'd gone to visit a friend who was stationed out there. We went to Warwick because I had fond memories of it, and it's actually a really fun little tourist trap. Very kitschy, super cool. There was, like, they have this whole underground dungeon tour that has to do with the Black Plague or something like that. It was, I feel it was bubonic plague, but I'm not super sure anymore. It was a few years ago that I went. Anyway, so we go, and I already know about the Dowager's room because that's become folklore in our family. I'm walking up to the ghost tower, and I had this, the way that my psychic experiences work is mainly through clairaudience, which is when it's called clear hearing. It is when you receive messages from spirit through your hearing. So you hear it sort of like a thought in your own head. I've even heard voices that were not my own, as if it was something speaking to me. But that's very, very rare. I think it's only happened once or twice. Mostly these messages from spirit come in the form of my own thoughts. So I heard something say to me, you're going to want to watch this. So I stop. I'm in front of the window, and I see a really big shadow, like way bigger than a human, cross this window. And at first I thought it was a person. And then the way that the sun was hitting it, how big it was, there's no way this was human. And then I later found out that as I walked in, because we went over there afterwards, was, oh, that room has been blocked off. They were like fixing it or something. We go in there, and I feel something really dark in the maid's room. And I'm just like feeling like, that's weird. So whatever it was traveling at that moment in time through the house or through the castle. And I go into the dowager's room and I instantly feel a really clear sense of dread. Now, my friend was behind me. He was super slow, liked to really take his time. And I'm just like zooming along, wanting to get to the dowager's room. So I get in there and yeah, like I'm realizing, and I'm testing it because that's the way that my mind works. I'm not immediately going to take something as haunted at face value. I'm walking in and out of the room trying to measure, is the dread in the hallway at all? Is it in my head? It was not in my head. It was a very real sense of dread. And then I read on the little table there that they used to do black magic seances in there. That's the folklore anyway. It's hard to say whether that actually happened or not. But no matter what, there is a very dark spirit there. And I would even go as far as to say inhuman. What do you think, Mom?
I didn't get a sense of the diabolical the first time, but I got a sense of darkness. I'd say on the dark side.
So yeah, we do have the ability to see spirits, but it is at certain times because I think the stars basically have to align and the veil between our worlds has to be very thin for it to happen. Because yeah, Mom, you've seen way more spirits than me. That was my only spirit experience. Do you see them all the time?
No, I don't. And usually there's no indicator leading up to when I am going to see one. I'm usually doing very mundane tasks when it happens. I've seen spirits pass through walls. I've seen them walk through the house. I've seen them out of the corner of my eyes. I have seen them take flight. I have seen a great deal over the course of my life.
So, all right, let's go into what was your first awareness of your abilities? I think yours is the earliest, so we'll go Mom, me, then Lex.
The first experience that I have in memory is before I could speak. I didn't even have language that I was speaking. And I have a memory of being on the farm. I was very small. I was walking though. I didn't have the ability to articulate words. I thought in pictures. My dog had run from me forward towards the road. I had run after him. I had got up close to the road and an audible voice I heard in my head said, "Do not go into the road. Your daddy will spank you." And my feet got to the road. My dog ran into the road and she was hit. And I remember looking down at my feet and they were not in the road. My dad, a second later, came running past me into the road, scooped up my dog, and had a look. I remember the look he had in his face when he looked at me like somebody had punched him, like he had just experienced the most awful thing imaginable and did not know how or why I was standing put at the edge of that road. And my father would later go on to relay this story to my brother and talk about it and cry over it. It was a deep sorrow for him. But I do believe the voice that I had heard was the Lord.
What did it sound like?
A man's voice. It sounded like an adult male voice telling me, "Do not go into that road." And it had saved my life.
Yeah, I love that story just because it's like, it does not matter the age. A psychic is a psychic is a psychic. Forever, you know? You're going to have to tell this story because I've only heard it from you guys secondhand. You noticed my abilities early on.
I noticed that being pregnant with you, if you measure an ability like a frequency, I'm always looking for language that helps other people understand what I'm experiencing. If the way you experience life is a frequency, like the peace and the joy and the love that flows through us, being pregnant with Victoria was disruptive. It was disruptive to my frequency, if that makes sense. having another human being who is tuned to a slightly different frequency. I understood at that time that her presence being there was disruptive to my own abilities. It was almost like something was messing with it. That's how I would describe it. The other story is when she was about 3 or 4. And Victoria and I, being my first child, we spend a lot of time during the day talking, childlike conversations. She would tell me what makes her happy. One morning, she comes in and she's like, "Mommy, I've had a dream." And I believe we were in England. And she said, "It's gonna snow." And I said, "Oh, well, that sounds like a nice dream, Victoria. But I don't think it snows here in England." I had never heard of it snowing. It rained a lot. It was cold. But at that time, it had never snowed while we were there. So I'm like, oh, that's weird. But deep down, I was observing Victoria and wondering, does she have abilities? So we waited a couple days. Just shelved that thought. And in a couple days, it had snowed just like she told me in her dream. And I'm like, that was my first awareness that she had the gift. And so after that, I paid attention to when she told me she felt things.
So that segues into the next thing. Sorry, Lex, we will get to you, don't worry. We'll get into mine of the time I went to the park by myself. Yeah.
I guess you're going to have to tell that story. That was a frightening story for me. You were an escape artist as a child. You were always trying to find your way out the door. You had a great deal of energy. You were always on your feet. And if I didn't keep my eyes on you constantly, my house could be an F3 disaster in 5 minutes. That's just who you were. You also had escaped out the back door when we were living in Phoenix, burned and scorched your feet. You'd done all kinds of things at that point, Victoria. So this day, Victoria got out. Yeah, it's hard to forget Victoria's stories. Victoria had escaped. My part of the story is coming out of the house screaming, "Victoria is gone." My neighbors running out of their house, and us as a group and as a mob on an Air Force base looking for a small child.
Okay, so to be clear, there actually was critical thinking happening. It just, nobody else could see it. I thought it was okay. I genuinely did, because I felt a presence next to me that it wasn't like physically holding my hand, but that's what it felt like. I'm not sure if it was an angel. It must have been. Based off the things that I understand about angel experiences, what it felt like was like sunshine. Like a better metaphor for it would be like the wind. You can't see it, but you feel it. Except it wasn't like that. It felt like warm sunshine. And I toddled down to the park because this thing was with me, and I didn't think I could get hurt with it being there. I really thought it was okay, and I did not understand why everyone was so upset. Couldn't they see or feel it? Because I couldn't see it either, whatever it was. But, couldn't they feel it was there with me? Why wasn't it okay? But that wasn't my first awareness that I was different, because I thought everyone was like that. I thought everybody had these abilities. I thought it was completely normal to be this way. My first awareness that I was different was when I was 9. It was either 8 or 9. It was somewhere around there. I was at a friend's house, and she had this really cool globe from New York City. I used to like to pretend it was a crystal ball. It just looked so cool. And I was carrying it outside, and I heard a voice say to me, "You're going to drop it." But it said it to me in my voice. So I thought it was like me being kind of like a naysayer, and I was like, "No, I won't." I dropped it 5 seconds later. And I was like, oh. And I remember going home and be like, "Mom, I had this thing happen to me." And she's like, "Vicky, it's the gift. Like, you're a little different." And you explained it to me. And then over time, we just sort of created our own psychic support group because no one else was having these experiences. I can tell you that much. Because I'd go to school telling them about how little Christopher talked to you or how whatever happened, and they would tell their moms, and then mom would have to explain. Because we were so different that, like, nobody could match our stories, like, at all. I'm sure they just thought we were liars. Like,
Who wouldn't?
right? I know. What about, you said Lex, you had noticed she had some gifting when she was a kid?
Not that she's high on the empathy scale. What I noticed with Alexandra when she was a little girl was that she seemed to understand what animals were thinking, what they were feeling, what they needed. She seemed to, like, tune in with them, understand them really well. It was a high empathy perception thing. She could also get them to play little games with her, which was interesting. She communicated really well with animals. So that's what I understood about you. You were very caring, very tender, and very gentle.
When I was a kid, I think it's interesting looking into more research about empaths. You'll definitely find that they have a closer relationship and understanding of animals than perhaps the average person. I read about that pretty recently, and I was like, oh, it's me. Look at that. I didn't really, of course, as a kid, there's no language. You have no language for anxiety and stuff. But I don't know, I was just able to tell that emotionally she was distant sometimes. But it wasn't, I don't know, looking back on it, it wasn't like necessarily a bad thing. Like, I mean, you hear like horror stories of parents checking out, and it wasn't quite like that. She was always there and helping us and taking care of us. But I think, like, I'm just, little, and I'm like, I just want to play. Like, Mom, why don't you want to play with me? Come on. Like, Dad plays with me. But I just had a sense of that. But it never really, I think, necessarily took away from my relationship with you, Mom. I just didn't understand, because my brain was, the brain of a child. You were so in the moment at all times that it's almost kind of weird to be thinking about being distant. I did pick up on it, and it wasn't until, of course, that I was much older did I really realize what it's like with anxiety to be distant and to feel distant and to feel a bit disconnected with the world around you.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I did not notice any distance, because I thought, much like Junie B. Jones, if you've ever read those books, she's very insular. She thinks only about herself. And I was like that exactly. Because if you read different books for girls around that age, and I reread my childhood books because that's what I'm like, they put me to sleep. So I reread Ramona books, right? And she's thinking about the world around her as a very young child. So she reminds me of you, Lex. She's a younger child, too. I can't help but think, is there a link between, like, younger children and being more empathic? It's possible. But I know that I wasn't. Not at all. Did I notice anything was wrong with Mom? No.
I will say that raising both of you, Victoria, you are very different from your sister. You are very different, but you're also very similar. You're both very caring, loving individuals, and you're kind to one another. But the one awareness that I understood about Lexi, I understood the day she was born that she was different. That her gentleness, her kindness, her sweetness, I think I actually heard the words, "This one is different." But what it did was tune me into the fact that her personality and who she was as a person was in contrast to my first experience, which I loved. I loved being your mother, Victoria. I loved being your mother, Alexandra.
Well, y'all waited a little bit after me. I think I was a bit much. Lex called me earlier. I don't know if y'all heard it, because we only have one microphone right now. So we're just passing it around. But she's like Loki. It's like, that's fair. That's fair. We actually got way sidetracked because we still haven't answered the first question. What's a rundown of our abilities? Let's have Lex have it, just because she hasn't talked in a bit.
Thank you. Another way that I've noticed that my abilities manifest is sometimes I just know things about people I shouldn't know. even based on any lack of evidence. Is
it feeling or knowing?
It can be a little bit of both. I think a lot of my abilities sometimes manifest in the form of like physical anxiety, which will let me know that, something's wrong. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it's just me, haha, because I have diagnosed anxiety. But sometimes it's like, it's not because of that. Like, I recently found out from my husband that his dad's house is haunted, and that completely explains the fact that out of all the years we've been dating and even married, I have never felt once comfortable in that house being there ever. Almost kind of a sensation of, I feel like I just want to crawl out of my skin and just be anywhere but there. And my husband's just like, oh yeah, no, it's there, we know it's there, we have this mentality of, we don't bother it and it don't bother us. And yeah, I disagree heavily with that. With my experiences, living with the spirit usually doesn't really do any family any good. And another thing, this one I just completely knew. It sounded like my voice. My upstairs neighbor, just to preface this, there was nothing about, one, the location, or two, their cars. I barely talked to this lady throughout the entire time of my lease there, but Zane and I were just talking in the bathroom, and I look up and I hear her, and I'm like, she's from a rich family. That was just the first thing that popped up in my head. And I told Zane, I'm like, she's from a rich family. And he's looking over at me like, okay, like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's so weird. While her partner was away, she must have gone to her parents' house or whatever, and I come back to that apartment, and what I assume is her dad is pulling out stuff from Alexis, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was completely right about that.
What about you, Mom? What are the other ways that you receive psychic information?
I don't like the word psychic. I come from a Christian background. That word has other implications for me. I like the word discerner of spirits. It fits kind of the journey I was on as I came into knowledge and awareness of it. I see, I hear, I understand the communication of emotion, the way the Lord speaks to me. We have different kinds of languages.
How are you getting that information? Do you hear it? Do you feel it? Do you just know it?
All of it.
All of it?
All of it. The stuff can surprise me. Yeah, I've had encounters with spirits since I was 17 years old. And I think that actively trying to live a mundane life is a goal for me. Those are my human experiences.
So I'd even argue we might even have a little bit of clairalience, which is clear smell. We've had phantom smells in the house.
Yes. Yep, that's a real thing.
We've smelled like cigarette smoke, and the previous owner didn't smoke, and especially not in here. So just odd stuff like that.
When I experienced that one, what are some of the smells? Fire. I just begin to smell it, and I'll call it out and ask the people around me, are you smelling that? And when they're going, no, you're like, okay. It's just me. In the house in Illinois, it was cigar smoke. It wasn't cigarettes. It was cigar smoke, roses, weird perfumes that none of us are wearing, wafting. Just all of a sudden, the room fills with it. And it's usually a strong burst, is how I know. But it indicates, oh, we might not be alone right now,
Well, it is thought some spirits are accompanied with smells. I'm not super sure about the science because that's kind of something I've never really thought about. Like, we just call them phantom smells. We just get them every now and then. But yeah, I'll have to look into the research on that one. So the rundown of my abilities currently, I can pull thoughts from someone's head if I know they're thinking. If I know the way that they think. So if I spend enough time around you, I can sometimes pick up on a frequency that I guess your mind is putting out as you're grasping for something usually that you don't quite know, like the name or the word or whatever, but it appears in my mind instead. Almost as if if your mind has tendrils, it's trying to reach for it, but the word goes to me instead. I've done that before at work and freaked people out. Someone at my last job was like trying to remember a name. And I swear I'd only heard this name once, and it had been a while ago. So there's no way I would have otherwise come up with it randomly, except that it appeared in my mind. And I said, and she was like, that's what it is. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I pulled it from your mind. And she's like, what?
You know, I wouldn't describe that process to be exactly my experience, but I definitely noticed the more I hang out with a certain person, I can genuinely finish what they were about to say. Like, sometimes I freak out even my own husband because I say something that was already on his mind, and he's like, oh, we often joke about it, like, oh, you beat me by like 1 second, or you just beat me by a couple of seconds. But definitely thinking about it a bit now, I'm like, that's probably not something most people can do. It's just, I don't know, I guess I just either can just know what someone's about to say. I would say it's definitely more of an unconscious thing than me trying to be like, yeah, I'm pulling what's out in your mind.
I can feel other people's spirits, what they emanate from their being. That's why I enjoy whatever your spirit, your soul, whatever a human emanate, I feel it like a texture. I have somehow the ability to just sense and feel it. That's why I love spending time with your dad in quietness. I can feel the essence of who he is as a human being, and
That's not weird at all.
it's peaceful.
Not to anybody else, it'd be like, what? You do what?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Also awesome. Sorry, I'm just over here making fun of my mom. No, like, it's not, because if you say this stuff to someone else, they're like, you do what? Like, what do you mean? What are you feeling? Like, and it's like, well, yeah, right? I feel like you need more meds. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's an awesome thing to be able to have abilities that so deeply transcend what's normal. I've always loved it. I did. I loved it since I was a kid. I grew up on that, like, horror and paranormal wave that happened during the early 2000s, and I was here for it. Do you remember me going to my friend's house to watch Truth or Scare every Saturday or whenever it would air? Because I would.
Yes, but I just thought it was going to be.
Did you think it would be a phase, Mom? Because it was not. Let's be honest. That was just one of the abilities I have. I'm also clairaudient, which I talked about. So clear hearing. I'm claircognizant, clear knowing, clairsentient, clear feeling, and a geomantic psychic. So I can feel the energy of cities and sometimes the earth. I used to have prophetic dreams. That has sort of diminished over the years, but it still happens every now and then. I still get information from dreams. So you guys have geomantic abilities. What are they?
I can enter cities and basically know what inhabits them. Either it has space, either that's the Lord's turf, or it's not. And I will know instantly. I'll know maybe not in numbers of how many, but if it is predominantly light or predominantly dark, if there are large diabolicals inhabiting the city. I'll know that too.
I would say the two places where I definitely got the most feelings from was, the first one was Illinois. I remember it just, nothing about being there ever felt right. I always felt this heaviness, but it just felt like, I don't know, oppression almost. Like almost I could feel a physical weight on my shoulders sometimes, just from school, the house. I mean, even just going out. I remember, I don't know how much you remember this, sis, but we would go on these long walks sometimes and like go find a park in another neighborhood, and all, I mean, it wasn't all that we talked about, but all, you know, the biggest thing came up is just like, why does nothing ever feel right here? Mm-hmm. Why does everything just feel wrong all the time? Mm-hmm. Even when I'm in a good, like, my mood didn't even matter. I just never felt good there. So any happiness or, I don't know, it just never lasted.
I always felt the really oppressive need to leave the house on Sundays. And it was always on Sundays, and it was because, like, I had spent too long in the house or something. I'm not exactly sure what that was about, but yeah, nothing really did feel right there. Like, what it felt like is that something didn't want us there. And then I felt this again in Logan, Utah. Now, you didn't really pick up on anything when you were first there, huh, Mom? Because it takes a bit. It takes a second for it to sink in, whatever it is. That was the weirdest place I've been as far as psychic feeling, because it felt like it wanted to spit me back out, type of thing. It's like, get away from here. This is not the place for you. Like, it was allergic to me, and I didn't feel good there. I felt like basically not sick as far as like, I felt psychically sick, if that makes any sense. I felt my spirit was sick because being there made me feel sick. It poked holes in my aura, and I went on a meditative walk through the city once. Weird as that sounds. Literally all I did was just sort of wander around Logan in my mind while listening to sort of like hypnotic music, and I saw a thing that looked a lot like, if you've ever seen Constantine, the movie with Keanu Reeves in it. They're making a new one. I'm so excited. There is a demon that tried to manifest on our plane that couldn't fully manifest. It was made of bugs. That's what it looked like to me. And that these bugs are like, they feed on psychics, and anybody who has even a bit of psychic ability, they find and they feed. I had talked about it because I noticed it at first as bad luck, that's how it manifested. Later, I found out what these things tend to do, these like parasitic attachments, they create chaos that for some people manifests in the form of bad luck. So that's what it seems like, but it's just chaos that they're causing. I would have 6, 7 bad things happen to me in one day, every day. And it just became, after a while, like at first I'd laugh because it's like, this is ridiculous. And I would tell my husband every day, like, babe, this happened to me and this happened. He's like, you should write a book. Like, Jesus. I'm like, no, I don't want to write a book. I want it to stop. And yeah, some of the chaos kind of followed me once I moved back to Wyoming for a bit. But wearing a Labradorite has been a huge help, because it was a weird thing. Like, I had just sort of found like a Labradorite earring that Lex is actually now wearing, because I gave that one to her because I was like, it's a smaller Labradorite that she's wearing. I felt I just needed something a tiny bit bigger to combat all the shit I deal with on a regular basis. But if you wear a Labradorite and you are a psychic, it has a side effect of acting as a shield if it's worn over your heart. So I didn't know that when I put it on, but the bad luck stopped. So what about you, Lex? You're wearing it right now. What's your experience?
Well, I was definitely experiencing a lot of bad luck before that. I had literally bathed in sewer water, unbeknownst to me. Well, I had no idea that they were cleaning out anything in the sewers and all that. And so I just hop in a shower like normally. And I'm just taking a normal shower. Nothing seemed off until I looked down, and I'm just seeing rust-colored water. And I'm like, oh, lovely. That's just great. I love this for myself. There was just kind of a shift after I got it, to where my luck went from like extremely weird and terrible to just, oh yeah, it's a little weird, but alright, let's keep going, to really not that much bad luck anymore.
Mm-hmm. Stops the chaos.
I also found my evil eye ring, and that really helps me, I think, combat like potentially psychic attacks or being around energy vampires.
So we're going to have to explain these terms because not everybody understands them. So psychic attacks, it can be a completely unconscious thing where somebody sends malicious feelings towards you. It can be somebody who's jealous of you. It can be somebody who just maybe doesn't like you. Some people do not know that they have psychic abilities and use them and wield them without realizing it. That's what happens a lot of the time when psychic vampirism. So psychic vampires are people who are sucking the energy that you're putting out, but they sometimes don't know it, but you can feel it. Now, we've all been around somebody who's like completely exhausting just to be around. That's a psychic vampire. They are feeding from you from that moment in time, and you feel drained once you've left their side. They just took something from you. A large part of being an empath is trying to combat that sort of thing in day-to-day life.
It's just interesting how our gift goes from the dead, the spiritual darkness, spiritual light, and then to human beings who are alive. So we're often dealing with a lot of stuff. Because it's amplified. For people who have abilities, we're experiencing life on high, I would say.
Lucky us.
It's not fun. It's not always fun. And oftentimes we have to find coping mechanisms. Large crowds, when I was a young person, made me very anxious. I felt darkness among people. I felt their jealousies, their envies, their hate. That's a lot. And I often don't like crowds. I'm not afraid of them, but I don't like them. It's because I'm picking up on too much stuff and it's affecting me, actually.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like crowds either. I would say, though, I've gotten better in recent years putting up kind of like a shield of like not letting their stuff in to my bubble. Like when I'm out, I generally don't notice the way people are reacting to me. The only time I do is when I'm actually with Lex. Because for some reason, probably because I'm looking out for her to make sure there's no weirdness, towards you. That's what you do as an older sister. Right. So I'm more on high and like being aware of my surroundings. There was this time, you remember, I would think I was wearing actually this shawl and like a black, I looked like I owned a yoga studio and I was getting all these looks. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, why does Cheyenne have a problem with yoga? Like, but yeah, so for the most part, I tend to block it out because I'm just not really paying attention. What was your scariest moment being a psychic? Mom probably has the floor with this one.
Scariest experience ever. Being asleep in our house in Illinois. This house was severely haunted. We experienced a great deal in this house. To set up the story, my husband and I like to sleep in rooms black, pitch dark. We get our best sleep in that. I woke up aware, usually when the Holy Spirit wakes me up. It's like riding through an elevator to the top floor fast. Something's happening. I open my eyes, shake off sleep, and think, uh-oh. I'm in the house in Illinois. A force of darkness that I could not explain. How big was it? Enormous. What I felt was diabolical. Imminent death, danger. And a force grabbed my arm. And the hand was bigger than anything I have ever experienced in my entire life. It was not human, and it was exerting pressure upon my arm, and in a split second I knew my arm was going to be broken in two. I screamed in my head. I couldn't get words out. I was frozen, terrified, and all I could scream was God, as loud as I could in my head. God. I never got to God help me. All I got to was God. And a flash of light, like a lightning bolt, went off in my room. And the whole room lit up. And whatever that thing was gone. And I sat up in my bed and thought, nobody is ever going to believe this story. And my husband slept through the whole thing.
So that is called psychic sleep. When you, like, this was a little bit different because you did not call out, right? You were frozen. That is very common also in demonic narratives, right? But so is, like, you could be literally screaming your head off and your spouse is not going to wake up because they put you in what they call the bubble.
I was not asleep.
Yeah.
I was awake.
So I guess we should probably do a rundown of all of our different abilities because, and we're going to have to explain all of them, especially for people who aren't really part of like the spiritualist, like psychic community. There are different words for it. So clairvoyance, sight. You definitely have it, Mom. I might have it a little bit, but it was just the one time, so I can't be sure. Lex, you don't have it. Mm-hmm. All right. So when your abilities manifest, Lex, how do you receive?
I think that's a great question. I have noticed that, especially either around right before I met my husband and a little bit before that, a lot of my experience has been actually really, there was a time where all I was experiencing my psychic abilities was through dreams. When my husband was my boyfriend back then and we took some time off, I had a dream that it was me basically like just trying to go through this weird old haunted house, but and then I ended up in like a school hallway like in high school, and all I was trying to do was find Zane, and I couldn't. And I think that when I woke up from it, I just had a strong sense of, oh, he's emotionally unavailable. Any kind of effort right now to talk to him, it's kind of in vain. And I remember you and Miss Joan across the street weren't very close at this time. I think you guys may have been in a fight. I don't know, it's too long ago, but I had a dream that I walked downstairs and you were just suddenly talking to her, and one day I came down the stairs and you were talking with her. And it was so jarring, it took me aback, because I was just like, this is some crazy deja vu, and then I remember that dream and I was like, whoa.
So is that different now? Like, do you receive in a different way now?
Yeah, I definitely don't have many dreams anymore that are like prophetic or giving me any sort of meaning anymore. My dreams are just weird. A lot of anxiety dreams about high school. Sometimes I'm just like, why am I here? Or I don't think this is a unique experience. I'm getting a little off topic, but like having those dreams where like I'm still in college, but something went wrong in high school. So I'm like high school and college at the same time.
That is super weird because I have that dream too. Like, it's
always when it's an upcoming semester too.
it's a saga for me.
Oh yeah.
I like still have my master's degree at this point, and I for some reason think it's a good idea to go back to high school to, I don't know, like get better grades then, except like that's impossible because like I think I'm still about as smart as I was, so math isn't going to change. Yeah. Maybe even less, because I find out I go back and then like my grades are worse. And then I'm sitting here like, why am I worried about this? I have my master's degree. I don't exactly have to worry about getting into college. I think it's because that school was haunted. So I'd like to go first with this story because I went first. Mm-hmm. And then you came the year after, I think. So I hated that school. And I didn't have a real like concrete reason. I didn't have a particularly difficult time with it or anything. But that school was definitely haunted. And I felt dread every time I was there, and there was nothing like specific that happened to me, but it was always an omnipresent sense of that I was in some type of horror movie. If the lights went out right now, this is a horror movie. So what about you, Lex?
No, that was pretty much my entire experience as well. Just I can't even really think of a time where I could ever fully relax there. I was always on guard, and there's no explanation really for that. And I think either I was still a freshman or just a very new sophomore. I can't really remember. I was in art club and we were watching like a bunch of movies. It was like a movie marathon. I think it was the weekend since no one else was there. And me and my best friend at the time decided to kind of wander away and just kind of do our own thing, probably because we had to use the bathroom or whatever, and we're like, let's just like go roam the halls. That was not a great idea in hindsight, because I'm like running around. We're both kind of like, oh yeah, no, this is fun, and then I'm just kind of like, oh, are the security cameras going? Like, not that I thought that we were really gonna get in trouble. I think it was just more of curiosity to see if it was actually recording. We get separated, and I go back and find my best friend, and they're in like a terror. Like there is so much dread there, and just like physical being scared. And I'm like, what's happening? And then I kind of look down the hall, and no, it's not us. I just hear like footsteps, and not even steps, like full blown. It's running towards us, and then I'm freaking out because I'm like, there's nothing there. But physically that I can see with my eyes, but every instinct in my body was like, run. And we both did, and eventually the teacher and one of my other friends at the time caught up with us, and my best friend was just probably having a panic attack, genuinely, and no one really knows how to support her through that. And I'm just kind of sitting there and like freaked out of my mind, because I'm just like, I didn't imagine. Neither of us did. And then I'm asking my friend, I'm like, were you chasing us? And he's just giving me this look like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And I just keep asking that, and same response. And then my friend was just like, oh, well, don't get pulled into her stuff or whatever. I think she's faking. We had a sleepover later that night, and I'm like, I mean, you saw it, right? She's like, yeah. And she started drawing these just like disturbing images of like, I wouldn't completely describe it as like Slender Man, but kind of a man in a suit, but like the face was just like torn and warped, almost kind of looking back on it like a burn victim. And whew, yeah, that was an experience.
Well, when it comes to joint experiences, and especially like even bigger than two people, because yeah, I do think there's such a thing as like, you know, two people could have the same experience, although like maybe you get sucked in. I don't think this is that, you know, because your body reacted to something you couldn't even see. So I think that was an experience instead of psychosis. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd also like to add that Lexi is our in-family skeptic. She is the one who insists on let's find 10 rational answers before we leap to a conclusion. I don't think this is bad. I have always deeply admired this about you. You have always been, Lexi, the family member least willing to accept what we are. I find it sometimes amusing and helpful coming to conclusions. It's good to have a family skeptic. It really is. But in the end, you have had your own experiences, and I think that is the contrast with your human experience. Because sometimes what people often don't realize is the people experiencing this stuff can be frightened. These are sometimes frightening, sudden experiences that leave you often with more questions than answers. I don't think I was ever spared fear in any of my experiences. I remember being 17 years old, a brand new Christian. I was still grasping the cross, what Christ did on the cross, when I had my first encounter with something truly dark. It wasn't diabolical, but it was enough to scare my young self half to death. And it was a spirit that spoke audibly in the hallway when I was laying in my mother's bed, calling to me in 3 different voices. In my mother's voice, in my grandmother's voice, and then a diabolical voice. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know about the spirit realm. I barely was just grasping that God was real. Very scary stuff. And actually, I've had a lot of really dark experiences. And I will say, one of my fascinations as the girls were growing up was the paranormal. It wasn't because it was an interest. It was because I was looking for information. Had anybody else experienced this? What is this? Why is this happening to me? Why does nobody else see dark shadow people? Why am I the only person I know who's having this experience? And I'll talk about when I was a young mom, you know, Travel Channel was breaking out with their group of paranormal researchers and investigators, and actually it helped me a great deal. Amy Allen actually was one of the first people who started talking about shadow people. And the reason that was important is because I had been seeing shadow people and nobody was talking about it.
Mine is a really similar story to hers, which makes it worse. So mine happened before her. I was 13. This had to be about 2007, 2008. I had this, it felt kind of like a dream because I don't sleep this way, but it was like there was a blanket over my head and something like used the blanket so I could not see it and then grabbed my throat, and it was a huge hand. It was like one of my hands could not even fit around one of its fingers big. and I couldn't breathe, and I knew I was dying, and it was almost the same thing. I couldn't think anything except God help me, and it vanished. So I genuinely think it was real, that it actually happened. Like, it was a little too real to be a dream, but it did have a weird dream-like quality to it. But still, I just don't think it's like, how could it possibly be a dream if Mom had the same thing happen, you know?
Mine was no dream. I was fully awake, fully aware, in the natural. It was not a dream.
What about you, Lex?
My mom's and my sister's was, I was just being, I don't know, plagued. It almost kind of felt like spiritually I was being poked at, but like, you know, not any fun poking. Probably just like, it was a bit of just torture. My anxiety was high. My depression was at an all-time high. I was pretty much in nervous breakdown mode, but it was broad daylight. I'm like sitting in my room and I just like keep praying to God, like just give me some relief, over and over and over again, until suddenly it just almost like this lightning bolt. I could see it, visualize that. It was just suddenly super bright, and then like I could breathe again.
Mm-hmm.
Like something almost was like sitting on my chest the entire time. Almost like a monkey on your back. Not a fun way at all. Not a cute little capuchin. More like chimpanzee that'll rip your face off. Definitely not fun. And yeah, I think what startled me, I don't want to say it startled me, but like I think after a minute, I just got up and I'm like, it's midday, and you know, how is that, you know, supposed to logically happen during a nice sunny day? And then I'm not sure if I immediately went to anyone to talk about it. I think probably my first one was talking to you, Mom, about it, and you just seemed kind of more puzzled. Not that you didn't believe me or anything, but I think just because there have been experiences in this house, but maybe not quite to that level. And yeah, like I said, you seemed perplexed, but you believed me. I think all of you believed me, which was nice. Because I think even though, you know, we're all psychics, that's something that's understood, but I think some of these experiences can just be so jarring that it's almost like you have to talk to someone about it and walk through it just to kind of, you know, feel better about it, not feel like, oh my gosh, am I slowly losing my mind? Who knows?
So your experience made me think of another super terrifying one that was more terrifying at the time than anything else. So when we first moved to Illinois, you remember that spirit that was bothering me? So it had been bothering me since California, but it was less strong there. Like it felt like at night something would sort of touch my arms and legs while I was sleeping, or while I was trying to go to sleep, because I'm my most aware and hypersensitive. I feel like we're all that way when we're falling asleep. We moved to Illinois and it got much stronger. It started to actively move my arms and legs. And we get to the house, it's even worse. It was just all very, very weird. And it was mostly scary because I'd never experienced that before. And that, in case you heard that, was Lily screaming.
My little sassy girl.
Lex's sassy cat, who did not want to be picked up by her grandpa at that moment in time. Anyway, this thing trying to sort of manifest in this way, and it was weird because it would ask for permission in an unspoken way to possess my arms and legs. And I genuinely think now that this was a jinn, and it had been with me for a long time. It actually only recently left me because I got a friend of mine involved who is a psychic who works in the astral realm. She was able to get rid of it for me, but something has come back recently. It's a new spirit, I can tell that. It's hard to explain because my mom talked about the texture. It's not quite like that. I know what it is because of the things it's doing. It comes in the form of no body, no, like you can't see it, but it's hard to explain how I know what it is. Probably just because I've dealt with it before. I've dealt with this exact same thing, overtly, weirdly sexual dreams, and I'm just like, what are you doing? I don't know you. Like, but in my dreams, like, I don't lucid dream. Like, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I'm just sort of there, you know? But there are even times in my dream where I'm like, where is David? Where's my husband? I never get to see him. Like, Especially when I'm like looking at someone else and I'm like, you're not David. I don't care about you. That's how it manifests to me, how I can tell. And it normally, that's the way it happens. They first try to enter your dreams and then they try to enter your life. So I'm still working on that though, because I don't fully know how to get rid of them or to prevent them from being there. Or to try and like make sure that nothing can see me in the spirit world, because we seem to have like a beacon effect in this family. It doesn't matter how we suppress our abilities or how much we don't think about it, things still appear. Lex, you've had some experiences with that, with just like not really wanting psychic ability. Like, how do you feel about it now?
I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, just kind of rejecting it was probably just a trauma response. I mean, it's easier to look in a textbook and be like, yeah, no, yeah, these are my symptoms. It's harder, I think, to admit that there's more than just mental illness going on. But I don't know, it might be the Aquarian in me that just always wants to find a logical answer for everything. There has to be something that can explain it. And then as I've kind of gotten older and definitely focused on more mental health treatment, just kind of I don't know, it just, finally coming to acceptance about myself and what I can do and being okay with it. Now it doesn't really faze me calling myself a psychic or anything like that. Like,
Doesn't scare you?
No, it doesn't freak me out anymore. No, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean anything freaky can't happen or anything weird, but I mean, now I'm definitely talking about it more openly with my husband, being like, yeah, I'm going on a podcast to talk about some of my psychic experiences. And he's like, I can tell he's a little bit like, oh, okay, that's great. But you do you. I'm very lucky in the fact that I have a husband that's willing to support whatever, I believe in and my belief system. And I think that's great. I'm definitely trying to understand more about it. And I'm also trying to look more into what it means to be an empath and ways to protect yourself from that sort of thing.
So that made me think of something else. We're all married. How has it been with other people accepting this who are so close to us? David's also psychic, so he doesn't have to accept anything. There are some things he's like, that's kind of strange and woo-woo. But he's pretty much the same thing, Lex. He's like, that's fine. I believe differently, but that's fine. Because David's like a hardcore Christian. And it's like, I get it. And it's not that I'm not. I am just... And also we need to clarify the word Christian, because unfortunately there are bad things happening right now that are associated with Christianity. We follow Jesus's teachings. We are not transphobic. We are not homophobic. We do not hate other people in this house. Mm-mm. We don't hate other people. So... like, with that in mind, I do believe in God. I also believe in a lot of other things. I think our world is stranger and older than we understand. And we have only just scratched the surface of what is going on, out there. Especially with the veil and the shadow world and all that stuff. It's crazy. It's awesome. I love it. Like, we are always finding out new stuff. But David's very supportive of me being psychic, even if it kind of irritates him sometimes, because we're going to move to California. And he's like, well, what if I have this place set up? Like, because his mom has connections there. And I'm like, babe, I need to see it. I need to walk through it. You do not understand. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yes. Because another random thing we can do is pick up on the vibes of a place. Mm-hmm. I walked into your apartment. I was like, I don't like it here. And hopefully it's different now, right? Yeah. Since we cleansed it. But yeah, it's just about kind of like upkeep, especially in a place like that. Just anytime you start to feel off or weird or even sick is a good time to just what about you and Dad, Mom? Has Dad just kind of learned to go with it?
I was recently asking him, because we've been married 30 years. I've always been honest with my closest circle around me, my brother, my sister, my husband. I'm sure that he thought I was weird.
Sure.
But I think over the years, it's when the things I call out come to pass. When I tell him, watch this person, they're subversive and have ulterior motives, and it comes to pass, he learned to begin to trust in what I was saying. You're going to experience something at some point. If you're around our family long enough, you may start out an unbeliever. You will begin to believe because you will be confronted with things that you've never experienced before. Why? This is a question I have tried to answer throughout my whole life. First, I will say I never asked for it. I come from a family of generations of gifted people. We are Jews. My family was out of Europe before there was danger. And I have often thought about, I know why that is. Because my people pay attention. The wind shifts, we feel it, we hear it, we experience it. And often for myself, over a course of a lifetime, in my youth and when I was a young woman, I chose to be quiet. I chose for the people around me not to know what was happening. My mother knew, my brother, my sister knew. Their coping mechanisms were to make fun of me as far as jokes about it. I think they understand as we've aged. I never changed. It only got amplified. Midlife, I'm choosing to be more open about it. Is that good? I don't know. I don't know if that's good. I know that navigating my way through life, it has helped me to navigate around sociopaths, psychopaths, sexual predators, dangerous people. I don't know if it's good to be open and say, this is what I am, but it's a choice I'm making today.
I was not like that at all. Like, throughout childhood, I was like, this is what I am. This is who I am. You better accept it, man. And I'm still like that now because it's like, I feel that no matter what, whoever this podcast ends up reaching, they might have similar experiences that they start to realize, oh, hey, maybe I have that too. I think it helps to know that there are other people just like you in the world, even if you don't know them personally. Like Amy Allen, seeing the shadow person, I'm sure that made you feel so much better. Like, oh my gosh, someone else sees them too.
I love her. If you've ever watched Amy Allen's show, this lady takes on the creepiest forms of darkness and goes in and reads it. And I just identify with her human experience going, wow, she just has amazing courage. And just her doing that, I think has helped me to cope with a lot of my dark experiences. I think investigators out there, I love that we have YouTube today. I love that we can see an investigator jump. And I know that sounds awful, but if you've ever been grabbed in darkness, that's exactly what happens. If you've ever seen a shadow person walk through your house where you're vacuuming the floor and you didn't expect it to be there and you scream at the top of your lungs, there's something comforting about other people screaming too.
What about you, Lex? Have there ever been times that you didn't want your abilities? I think it's pretty clear you didn't ask for this, Mom. It's like, how was it then shifted into now? As far as how you feel about this.
When I was younger, the problem is when you have really bad anxiety, you already have doubts about yourself. Mm-hmm. So I think at that time, I was just dealing with so much feeling abnormal, and because I'm suffering from severe anxiety and depression. So I think that definitely played into how easy it was for me just to suppress that and want nothing to do with it, just because it's like, well, I feel strange already and I'm just a young teenager as well who already feels strange. I think it was just easier for me to just bury that and just be like, nope, I don't want it. If I don't want it, maybe it won't happen, kind of a mentality. And now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, no, I talk with everyone around me that I'm psychic and I talk about this stuff all the time. No, but I acknowledge, my family, where I come from. It's almost like being a force sensitive in Star Wars, really, and it's weird because I always related to those characters, and I always was just the ones, like, as soon as I knew any character had some force sensitivity, they would always become my favorite, just because the Jedi, especially when they were taken down, there's always some sort of mysticism, and you could easily be like, yeah, no, the force is, the universe, or the God, or, whatever you believe in. Just the parallels were there, so it's like, even when I was like, no, I don't want to be this part of myself, I'm still relating to characters who have these abilities that they want nothing part of too. I think that was probably just a major coping mechanism. Now I'm okay with it. I understand. You can't really, I don't know, I don't want to say you can't, but if you believe in a higher power, God, you gotta take the good and the bad that go with it. You don't just get one side of that. You don't just get the light all the time.
Like, some people are walking around who have never had an experience like us, and we're just like, what is that like? Because, like, I haven't had a ton of supernatural experiences lately, mostly because whenever they happen, I'm just like, no, I'm not here for this right now. You think this is happening? It's not. Like, let's see.
Gaslight the ghost.
Gaslight the ghost. Well, okay, so I had heard something, and this genuinely may have just been like a creak of the house. I completely believe in normal things causing our perception of, oh my gosh, is someone there? I'm not super sure. I didn't stick around to investigate, but it was like late at night. I'm always up during the night because I work night audit, so I'm supposed to be up during the wee hours of the night and then the morning, right? So I was up, I was getting some food. I had just closed the refrigerator door, so it was all darkness, and I thought I heard something, like someone moving. And I was like, you want to run that by me again? Like, because it sounded like somebody had said something. They did not, in fact, want to run that by me again. So, like, there's this TikTok, and I wish I knew who it was by, because I'll have to look it up again. I think I had saved it. But it was about a guy who was, like, pissed with the paranormal in his house and was, like, banging pots and be like, you want to go? Like, and it's like, yeah, that's how I honestly sometimes feel about the paranormal. A friend of mine at work was like, you hate the paranormal. And I'm like, no, I don't. It just always happens when I'm, like, not here for it. Like, I'm clocking into work and something pokes out and I'm like, no. Or, right? Or, like, walking up the dark stairs and I hear something behind me and I'm like, no.
Not today, Sadie.
This is not happening today. Like, yeah, so that's a lot of my, experience with it. But a lot of other times I might just be not very open to it at the moment. But when I'm having other awarenesses, they tend to be fairly welcome. Like, when I'm ready for it, if that makes any sense. It's when I'm not ready for it that I'm like, go away. This isn't the time, bro. But, like, or when I get awarenesses about the land itself. When I went to South Carolina last summer to go to Atomicon and speak, I felt something. It's hard to explain exactly. I had written about it in another post. If you want, go check it out on demonfolklorist.com. It's about my psychic experiences and the Lizzie Borden house and then Salem. So I felt a sense of earth magic, deep growing magic, something that made the land fertile. And it sort of spoke to me in its own way, and just it was actually weirdly in poem form, and it was rhyming, which I thought was funny. And it came to me while I was driving at night back from the beach, and it was through this very dark part of the forest. It was actually a little creepy. I would have been creeped out if I didn't feel a sense of comfort. Like, this place did not hate me, did not want me to be there. It told me, the only thing I really remember, I wish I'd, like, written it down or, like, I don't know, recorded it or something as it was saying it to me. But it just sort of spoke to me while I was driving, and it was like, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, which is from a poem I had heard. I can't remember which poem, but it's a poem. It's out there. You can Google it. And here the dead do sleep. Except, if you know anything about that side of the U.S., it's not a place where the dead sleep. So I thought that was strange. What I felt it was saying to me was, The dead aren't going to bother you here if you're not interested in talking. They go about their own business here. It's different. The South, I love the South. There's nothing like it. But I'll be heading to North Carolina, and I can't wait to see how different it is. But when we went to Boston and to Massachusetts area, it was different. It was, I heard, it's all in that specific post on my website, exactly what I felt there, but it was a much different form of magic. There was fire, metal, bone. It talked about all sorts of things. And when I say it talked about, literally, like when I'm in a new place, the land sort of speaks to me through my clairaudience and tells me things about itself, which sounds insane. It's like, oh, the earth is talking to you, better up your meds. So I tend to hear words associated with the land itself and what it's trying to tell me about itself. And Massachusetts is a different type of magic that goes on there. There were dark things in the trees. It was just, yeah, it was a different place, but it didn't feel unwelcoming.
I love dark things and trees.
I know, who doesn't love dark things and trees? But yeah, it was welcoming in its own way, if that makes sense. Like, South Carolina beckoned. It wanted me there. It liked that I was there. Massachusetts was like, I don't really care if you're here or not. You're fine. And then other places like Logan, Utah are like, get out. So that's my experience. Did you guys have any experiences you wanted to talk about with Geomantic? Like feeling energy in the earth and cities?
I already kind of did with Illinois.
That's fair.
A little bit.
What about Nevada? Nevada was weird.
It was just... For me, anyways, Nevada just felt... It was different than Illinois. I didn't feel as oppressed there, but I definitely felt more awareness to, like, my physical danger. You know, this place is dangerous. If anything, my feeling uncomfortable just came from people, really. And it kind of just sounds like I'm being paranoid, but really, I especially when we were out and about, I didn't really like to go out and about. I didn't feel really safe there. I think it wasn't until we started, like, taking defense classes did I feel more at ease living there. Probably just, I mean, we lived in weird places before that were semi-dangerous, but Las Vegas was always the one that I perceived as I feel the most, like, physically in danger. Like, I didn't want to go out without really any of you guys, or really I just didn't really want to leave the house, period. I didn't want to go to school there anymore. The kids my age, they're disrespectful, some of them, and rude, and nothing about that high school ever felt like it. Yeah, no, you're wanted here. I got lucky. I found someone who ended up becoming my close friend and my only friend there, and I think that was definitely kind of a nice buffer, but always felt uncomfortable there. Didn't enjoy it. 0 out of 10 IGN.
I was having a slightly different experience. Do you remember? Like, I just kind of went everywhere. Like, I couldn't really be stopped. I sort of went everywhere. I even worked at a place that was called Meadows Mall, and people called it Ghettos Mall. That it was just not in a very good area, but I never really felt unsafe. And I don't think I really ever did in Vegas, although I did there for sure were people who were not safe. There were areas that were not safe. But yeah, no, I would walk around the neighborhood. I felt two very different things. I would sort of like, because I was taking a Nevada history class that later became it became unuseful because of the way it just didn't count for other college credits, except for in Nevada. Imagine that. But it was interesting how there were asteroids and stuff like that, and the stories that the Native Americans would tell about that area. And I did feel a very interesting sense of spirituality in the land, in the basin, because Las Vegas is in the basin. It can be beautiful. The desert can be beautiful. But there was also something else underneath everything at its core that was rotting. That's just how I felt about it. That it was a beautiful place. It could have been a more beautiful place, except, Sin City, there was also something really wrong with it that I hated once you started getting closer to the Strip. But the Strip can be fun. It's weird how, that, and then yet you also feel like this is fun. Because I liked when we would go to the Strip, right? We would have fun there. Las Vegas, it did also have a very distinct sense of evil. in certain areas. But in the area that we lived, oh my gosh, that was another psychic thing that happened. You remember? I found our house because of my clear knowing. Remember, we were looking for a house. We could not find one. Do you remember this, Dad?
I do.
Dad doesn't remember. So we apparently have another random little talent, which is the clear knowing of where our house is going to be. We had trouble finding a house in Las Vegas, and I knew we had to keep looking. We were starting to kind of run out of options, and I think we were planning on maybe taking a different place. And I was like, no. We have to go over here. We have to go over here. And you guys kept being like, what are you talking about? Like, there was some resistance, but I was like, no, it's over there. I swear to God, it's over there.
Feel it over there.
Yeah, like, and we went towards, where was that? North. It was in North Las Vegas. And I was like, it's over here. It's over here. And then we passed a for rent sign. And we got them to come down to a more reasonable rate. And it was a beautiful house. But yeah, I found our house.
But we were talking about Las Vegas. My experiences weren't positive. I survived Las Vegas. I was dealing with a diabolical through an open door that somebody else opened. It was very unpleasant. I got sucked like a battery. It was awful. But I'm glad we lived through it. I'll say that.
Technically, we're just, even though these things are horrible that have happened, we're a lot stronger now. You know, we have knowledge now that we can use to combat such things. Would I ever go live in Las Vegas? I'd rather die. Thanks.
Same.
Some places are more haunted than others.
Our experiences, though, what year was that? Because it was right, I remember being here in
2013 through 2015.
2013 through 2015. I remember being here when I heard about, I was sitting at the table sewing when I heard about the massacre in Las Vegas and in downtown, the Strip, where a great deal of people had been shot by a man through one of the high rises at a concert.
Oh, God.
And feeling just devastated that day because I knew there was something evil there. Like bigger, badder, darker. I just wanted to pack my stuff and leave immediately. It was awful.
There was also a huge suicide rate there. Like it was could be a very dark place. So it's weird, like when we're talking about this, like we're all having a different experience in some of these places. Like some were having a super dark experience. Some people had a little bit of light here. It's funny how different psychics will interpret the world around them and how they'll feel, because Lex, you got hit with Las Vegas the most, I would probably say. Then Mom, then me. And I had my possession experience in Las Vegas, and I still don't think it was as bad. Like, it was horrible. I'm not going to downplay that. And it did take place in a dark part of Las Vegas, like the deep, dark heart. But I still also had times where I'd just walk around the neighborhood, which was fairly safe, kind of an upscale neighborhood, and just think about how the Native Americans must have felt in this area and thinking about things like that. Like, because what it feels like are memories in the earth that I'm receiving somehow, if that makes any sense. Like memories of past times and the present mixed together, and that's what I'm receiving. Then again, I tend to look at my memories with rose-colored glasses because nobody really wants to be dwelling on the darkness of your memories. So I tend to remember those times above the other times, which were not good. You know, it was a dark place.
After living in Illinois, from the me that came from California, just kind of a awkward, shy teenager, maybe a little anxious because, I don't know, kids there could be rude sometimes. Like some days I just wanted to stay home, watch, whatever, draw a little bit, be creative. But that person going to Illinois, that place has changed me completely. that's when I started having severe anxiety, phobias about stuff that does not make any sense, of course. I mean, that's the nature of phobias, of course. Unsettled, terrified. That place just, on some fundamental level, broke me at that time. So moving to Nevada afterwards, it was almost like I'm living in the wreckage that's my psyche at this point. And of course, being screwed over by mental health professionals in Las Vegas didn't make anything any better for me. It was, I mean, you also got to look at it at a lens of they, see so many people at the same time. It's I got taken advantage of. I got traumatized, just dehumanized on every sense of the word. And it took a long time, I think, to come back from that and feel any type of normality. And it just, every place we went after that, it was just kind of like, I have a worn down psyche, and I'm doing my best on my own, but on my own it wasn't enough anymore. So I think living here in Wyoming, while it kind of has its, it has its downs and stuff, their healthcare is mental health care at the very least is a lot better here. And it was finally like, I get to recover from this. And I mean, on some level, it's not every day you get to go up to your therapist and be like, yeah, I lived in a haunted house, and I never was the same person again after that. But I'm learning to cope better, and I'm facing, those traumas, with what was happening. And on some level coming to acceptance that the way that I felt about myself and just all that anxiety, depression was just in an amplifier in the Illinois house. Everything was 100 times worse. So, yeah, fun times. Love that for myself.
I think that's why I live in Wyoming. It has its own uniqueness. It's a difficult place, but it's peaceful here. I feel a sense of peace here. Because that's often a discussion we have in our own family. We do have trauma from our experiences. It was never intended. We didn't go looking for it. It actually came looking for us. And how do you walk into a therapist's office and say, I know I need some therapy, but I've got this story, and you're not going to believe a word of it. You're going to say I'm crazy. And what I want you to know is every bit of it happened. I think for me, there's resentment. I am having an experience in life that isn't fair, isn't kind, was brutal, and I just had to find coping mechanisms. And nobody except the paranormal community would believe it.
That's fair. I don't think I have that resentment because I don't think I care whether people believe me or not. I've even talked openly to therapists about the crap that's happened to me, because it's like, if you judge me, I just get rid of you and I get a different one. Like,
yeah,
my last one,
they're gonna believe me.
They may not believe you, but you can always frame it as, well, I know if you don't believe in this, that's fine, but I do. They have to respect that. So that's the way I've approached it.
I mean, definitely one thing adding to that you learn in psychology is when you're a therapist, you have to go along with what your patient is going through, because on some level, even though you can look at a delusion like, oh, that the government has planted chips in my head and they're tracking me, you hear something like that, it is the therapist's job to take you with where you're at. Even if it's like, no, that's not happening, it's real to them. And that's what's important there, is supporting people where they're at and what they believe. And if you encounter a therapist, in all honesty, that's not like that, that's not a good therapist. And like my sister said, you gotta move on.
So, with all that in mind, where do you think you got your abilities from in the family? Because Lex's kind of sound like Grandma Sherry.
I guess you grow up with a super sensitive mom, grandmother, great-grandmother. I was fortunate enough to have other women around me. As a family just communicates and connects, it was natural. I was experiencing a great deal as a child. I was also experiencing comfort and peace because of my other family members. They were too. They were moving in gifts all the time, but it was normal. I will share a story with you. I scared my own mother. My abilities became very, very strong. I had had a dream that my grandfather was going to die, and I felt awful. And I just told my mom, because she was such a gentle soul, Mom, I want you to know that this is going to happen. And I told her the dream. It scared her. After it happened, it took her a little while to process and talk to me.
Yeah, we all seem to have our own, like, experiences with darkness at varying levels. I seem to have a problem with jinn, specifically. They seem to find me, which is a weird concept if you think about where they're from. But if you also think about dark attachments and the way that works, yeah, something could easily transverse the ocean if it's attached to somebody, right? We seem to have this problem in this family of being spiritual beacons. They can see us. Because apparently what psychics look like, and I knew this long before I ever read it, but we look like lights to dead people and dead things, anything in the spirit world. So they seek us out. They want to be near us because it's like being alive again. That's the theory. Anyway, I don't really talk to ghosts and it's not like I don't respect people who do. Like, absolutely, if that's your thing. I just don't really have anything to say to them. Like, and I don't really have any interest in what they have to say back. But if that's your thing, go for it, dude. Like, I think it's an interesting subject. It also just might be dangerous for this family because we're just a little close to the veil. Things find us. So maybe it's best we don't seek it out.
I find because I think what's true about my life too is there have been many, many years that are quiet where we're going through experiences that are very mundane, very everyday, building our lives. I can go a very long time without having an experience and not even talk about it for a very long time too. And then all of a sudden it just breaks out. I find it to be disruptive. I don't like it whatsoever. But what am I going to do?
We went on a wonderful tour of Lizzie Borden House and we loved it. It was a good story, although we didn't, because I was planning on staying that night and we wanted to make sure it didn't have a dark spirit in there. It didn't. It had something that I perceived to be human and it was electrical for me. When it was nearby, kind of looking in, I felt very uncomfortable because it was like I was too close to power lines or something like that. That's how electrical it felt. Like electricity was starting to course through me. I didn't like it, but I didn't feel anything evil or even angry that we were there. It was curious about us. It wanted to know why we were there because I was with a big group of women with the Feminine Macabre group. And yeah, it was just very curious about us.
Do you immediately identify and classify coming in contact if you enter a room with a spirit? Does it read to you immediately?
Yeah, it's just hard to explain because like you said, it's not quite the texture of it, although texture's there. It's like walking into a room and a light being on, but only you can see it. But it's a felt feeling, so it's harder to explain. It's like feeling the warmth of the light, but no one else can feel it. So instead, but that's just what it's like to sense something in a room. That's not actually what it feels like. What it feels like is electricity, or just you have this very strange awareness and you can't explain it away because you try as a human. You're like, maybe this is this, maybe, because it's a lot easier to believe that it's something else than it's an actual spirit. But you feel it and you know it's there. Maybe you don't know where it is exactly, but normally I do have that awareness. I can feel the nature of its being. because it'll present itself to me in my mind's eye of what it is, and that's the only way I can describe it. Because like even on when you guys are watching paranormal shows, because they watch them to this day, I'll be like, yeah, he's got weird stuff around him, I don't like that, I actually have trouble watching it. It's because I have another gift that I completely forgot to mention, because there's just a lot. Okay, I can pull information from photographs. It's not always, but it happens, right? And when you can do that, you can also pull things from TV. I've also been warned about the dangers of that sometimes things can come through.
Yeah, I shut it off. When I'm experiencing something through the television, I shut it off. That's just, I have experienced that. That is very real. I can experience what's around other people, even though I'm not in the same room with them. And that's when it's like, okay, time for that to go off.
A good psychic exercise for anybody who is having trouble sleeping because they are psychic and they can't really control it as they're trying to drift off in that hyper aware state is to pretend that you are turning off your psychic abilities like a switch. So what I do is it's as if I'm in a recording studio. I turn off all the knobs first and I unplug all the things, and then I flip huge switches from my psychic abilities from on to off. I'm not receiving anymore while I sleep. So something for someone to try. I've been told by other psychics it works. I don't remember how I came across that one. I think it might have been in a book I had read. I'm not really sure, but yeah, turning off your abilities, it helps a lot. But any other closing remarks? I mean, what would be your advice to somebody who is finding out that they're psychic, or who listens to this and feels like some kind of kinship with us? I think my message would be, don't be afraid. I know that's ridiculous because it is scary, but try your best not to be more afraid of it than you already are, because out of fear, I think, is born a misunderstanding. So yeah, it's going to be a little scary. It's going to be jarring, but it is nothing to fear.
I think for me, I have always found safety drawing close to the Lord. The closer I am to Him, the safer I feel. Either through the Word, through prayer, through always cultivating that connection towards heaven. I think that for me is what I seek. That's how I deal with all of this. Is I know it's bigger than me. I know that I don't have the power to vanquish. He does. He has. His power is great. It also is healing to my spirit to connect to Him, to feel the Holy Spirit, the breath of heaven. That's where I find my peace. To seek the light, I guess. Seek the light.
I would say the best place that you can really start is just trying to read a little bit more about it, what it means to be a psychic, what other psychics have to say about it. And I think it's also important finding out what works for you, because I mean, everyone as an individual is already uniquely different. So I don't really think, especially even being with psychic, there's a one size fits all solution. I think you have to kind of, like I said, figure it out, cultivate it, explore it. I mean, I don't really think being religious and spirituality is what I'm realizing is that they're not so different. It's pretty much almost the same thing, just kind of a little extra added steps. So, I mean, connect to a higher power, go to your metaphysical shop, maybe pick out some stones there, maybe get a necklace. It's, of course, it's always up to you what you want to do and what you feel comfortable with. And yeah, don't suppress that. Don't suppress it. It's never going to go away. Trust me. I've tried really, really hard not to be psychic. Apparently it's not possible. Just know that you're not alone. There are a lot of psychics people out there, and there's a lot of people that will believe you, even if you're surrounded by someone maybe who doesn't believe you.
Yeah, I really like that. You aren't alone. You aren't alone in these experiences. And yeah, there are different ways to deal with it. Weirdly, Pinterest is a great psychic informational space. There's a lot of information about being psychic, about crystals. If that's something that works for you, maybe it's incense, maybe wearing certain crystals helps you. So what are we wearing right now? Lex is wearing labradorite. I'm not wearing mine today because I worry it's going to get damaged in the sun. So Lex is wearing hematite and onyx. Those are very protective crystals. Rose quartz for love. That is a moonstone. They're good for like peace, tranquility, that sort of thing. She's also wearing a diamond. Diamonds have crystal qualities of similar.
Evil eye for sure.
Evil eye. She's wearing emeralds, which are good for... They're connected to love, but I can't remember the other stuff they do. I think truth. A little bit of luck, yeah. But jade is more connected to luck. I happen to be wearing a jade. Let's see what else. I'm wearing an emerald. I'm wearing a moonstone. Super 7 I found to be a very protective stone. Helps with a lot of negativity. Also, it's either rhodonite or rhodochrosite, but either way, both of them are pink stones associated with love and self-love and that sort of thing. And Mom's not wearing any because she doesn't believe in that.
I wear my cross and my Star of David.
Yeah, and I got our cross made of labradorite, so bases are covered. She doesn't believe me, but whatever. You got to do what you got to do. Unfortunately, the artisans of Etsy love them so much. So many cool stuff. Have not picked up a labradorite and a Star of David, but the day they do, she'll be getting one.
What is your advice to anybody out there experiencing the beginnings of a haunting or a spirit in their home that they do not?
Great question. No, but oh well. I just sort of end my podcast the way I feel like it. Why have structure? Like, my advice would be to first take care of your mental health.
Yes.
Take care of that first, long before you start anything else. First, you need to be protecting your mind. And then you start by protecting your spirituality, your body, and you'll find the way that works best for you. Some people find it in concrete things, like crystals or whatever. It's whatever is most comforting to you that you feel works, and you're going to have trial and error because everyone's different.
Do you feel like the word?
I do think there is quite a bit of truth in the Bible. I also think there's a lot of things that don't really make sense. It's been rewritten so many times. There are things that feel like they've been taken out of context and retranslated. I know, unfortunately, way too much about the Bible and the way it's been mistranslated and then retranslated. But you can find solace in it, I think. You can find solace in the Quran. You can find solace wherever you find it. I think every religion has some truth in it. You just have to go and find it for yourself. Because we don't want to alienate anybody here who is of a different religion. I have great respect for witches and Satanists and everybody because we all believe something, and we should not be judging each other. That's the last of what Jesus wanted us to do. So, as long as you're not hurting anybody, though, I think you're doing just fine. But, yeah, that's about it. That's all I got. Anything else that we want to add? Okay, well, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Hope you have a demon-free day. And if you are psychic and you have questions, I am more than happy to answer anything I know or to point you into the right direction. But I do not know everything. I'm still on this journey too. You can always I do have a Twitter account and an Instagram account for this podcast. Everything's under Demon Folklorist or the Twitter account's Demon Folk Pod. You can come find me. You can comment on one of my... I do posts about when this podcast episode is coming out, you can ask questions on there. You can create a free Spreaker account and post comments and questions on there. Please be nice though. I'm not going to acknowledge you if you're not nice. And yeah, I'm totally happy to answer questions about our experience or to pass along the questions and then address them in the next podcast episode. No idea what it's going to be yet. I have not thought that far, but we'll get there. So yeah, if you have questions, comments, Please, no concerns, because no offense, we're fine. Let's just be respectful on here. But I do want to hear from you if you have a question. But yeah, see you later.